All right. All right, guys, we're back. It's been 2 consecutive days, man. I'm feeling good. It's been a while since I've had 2 consecutive days, and I'm really excited for who that's with. My guy Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews. How are you tonight, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Doing wonderful. This is, in my mind at least, we'll get into it here in a little bit, but you were like a guy that is one of the reasons, one of the top 3 reasons I'm here. So to be talking with you, man, is just really cool. So, been kind of thinking about it and coming up with some questions for a while. And I think we share the same barber.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Well, I hope not the exact same one because mine's my wife.
That's great. So no, we don't share the same barber in that situation. I'm in Ohio, and you're in California, right?
Yeah. I'm Sacramento.
Yeah. So I was born in California, but I am very ignorant to the geology of California. Tell me if you're familiar with Kern County. Edwards Air Force Base.
I worked for a politician. We represented Kern County, so well familiar.
When I write my birthplace out, man, it's one heck of what it's. Edwards Air Force Base, California. It's a sentence. Yeah. I was 2 when we left, so I guess it sounds cool sometimes when I get to tell people I'm from California, but have no recollection. My dad was
you're Californian.
So right now I'm going to try something, and I want you to give me a review real quick, and it's from 1 to 10 scale. Okay, let me zone in.
Yeah.
And I'm done. All right, 1 to 10. How was it?
That's I'd say like a 9. That's great.
Ooh. I'm happy. A 9 from the guy himself. I'm so happy for that.
Yeah, that's solid.
To do it for a while. All right. So I was kind of talking last night with a guy, Mr. Christopher G. Branning. He's a self-pub author of some wicked, awesome grimdark. And kind of going back to the way I formatted interviews when I had no idea how to do it. And I kind of just landed in what I was comfortable with and what I think works the best. So when did you find that you love literature, man? Because it's evident you're very good at expressing your feelings in a way that is critical, yet you're not biased, unless it comes to like a couple authors I can think. But maybe some, what is his name? Beardy? Yeah, that may be a little biased. But where did you find that love, man?
Man, I've been the kid reading on the playground, since I was a little kid. I mean, as soon as I learned how to read, that was my jam. And reading a lot of fantasy books at a very young age and getting into it. So yeah, since basically I remember, I've had a head in a book, and was just really obsessed with it. I fell out of it for a while as high school and college came around because it just can zap the fun out of casual reading. For at least when I talk to people I know, a lot of people, and because you're doing it so much, that's the last thing you want to do when you're not doing homework. Sure. And then kind of came back into it, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And yeah, just happy I picked it back up and back to the hobby that I had when I was younger.
It sounds like a lot of his, I can't relate. And the reason I'm saying that up front is because I talk to, 9.9 authors out of 10 that I speak with have a almost like word for word what you're saying. It was very different for me. So those foundational moments that you get to tell me that you were young, man, I feel jealous because you've got an imagination that I feel like is well curated, and you know exactly what you like, which I'm still on that very young journey. I can tell you generally what I like, but when I watch your videos or watch Mike from Mike's Book Reviews and a bunch of others, of course, but I'm speaking about my inspirations when I first started binging Booktube. It's very cool to me. I'm still young in that journey, but you helped me learn how to be critical, how to separate certain genres and then those subgenres. So it's nice to hear that foundational story from a guy like you.
Yeah, it's cool to have that catalog of books you've read so you can kind of figure out stuff you like. And on the other side of the spectrum, it shocks me how much I'll read a book that I know I'm not going to like, because, on my channel, I do a lot of opportunities for people to make me read a favorite book of theirs or something. And,
Yes.
And I've read many books that I'm like, I'm going to hate this thing. It's not my thing. And I read it and I'm like, that's awesome. Apparently, things slip through the cracks sometimes. So it's
Sure.
You certainly always have to kind of, finding something you like is awesome, but also kind of trying to keep that open mind to things that you didn't realize are awesome.
If you don't read something and say, I finished it, I have respect for it. I like certain things about it, but it wasn't my jam. Is growth, and it's some of the coolest growth. Coolest, I don't know, like impressive, inspirational growth that I see, like through your channel, Mike's channel, and a lot of others, and especially a lot of authors that I see like doing interviews, or not interviews, but reviews through like Twitter or what have you. One of my favorite authors popped in the comments, so I got to throw him up, Mr. Ryan Cahill. Matt has this brimming excitement, and he doesn't tell which Matt, because look, Booktube's full of Matts. So we're just gonna both take this one. He loves a book that is honestly just so invigorating to see, but I'm pretty sure he's talking about you, because that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Ryan's books make me feel a lot.
When I think that's the only series I started before you did. Not much before, but I started before, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to hear, you kind of give a little bit of a view of how you feel in the thumbnail. And I really like that. And expressing your enjoyment, just, it hit me in the soul, because his books are foundational to me. Classic fantasy was, for me, first Robert Jordan, and then honestly, Ryan. That's how new I was to this genre. And it reminds me every sentence that when I'm reading his novels, I'm almost done with War and Ruin, and it's just incredible. Everything that I heard from you and Mike, it rings true, and it's epic. It's huge. It's vast. When it makes sense, it's not confusing.
Yeah, for me, it was one of those books I was just talking about where I didn't really think I was going to like it very much, because when I hear things like old school fantasy, that turns me off.
Yeah. I was scared for you to read it.
Yeah, it works very well.
I love that. So cool, man. Ryan, thank you. He's over there in New Zealand representing, and what a wonderful country. That's one I want to make it to, as well as Australia. I have to dive the Great Barrier before it's just gone. But thank you, Ryan. Oh, okay. No, I think I'm just going to hand that over to Matt. So thank you for saying that's very kind of you. So what are some of those? Okay, I'll get to this one. So I've told you that you were a part of that inspiration for me. Mm-hmm. Who was that for you? How long have you had this YouTube channel? Because I don't know. I haven't looked at the specifics, and I wanted to ask you about it. How long have you had it, and who were you watching? You're like,
so mine's a little like 2 years and like a month. I've had the channel, and I'd say that the biggest one for me was Patrick, and it was not because he's like my favorite, although I do like him, and that I agree with him a lot. I don't agree with him a ton, quite frankly, but he was doing the kind of same thing I did, where I was making a ton of reviews on Goodreads, and I accidentally got a following on Goodreads initially because I'm kind of OCD, and I kind of get really caught up in some things.
No way.
Namely books. And so I was like, Goodreads is a thing. I need to go catalog all the books that I've read and write little reviews about them, and that would make my brain feel happy. But because I was doing so many of them, all of a sudden I started getting some likes on some of them, and I was putting out so many on my backlog that I started going up on like the rank of people that have reviews in your country. And then I started every time I make a review, I'd have all these likes unintentionally. And then I started like adding friends and kind of playing the system a little bit. And I noticed on all the reviews I do, I'd be like, oh man, I'm like the second highest ranked person on here behind this Pectrick guy who's got like 1,000 more. And then I saw that he had like a Booktube channel, and that's how I got introduced to Booktube in the first place. And that's kind of the connection that made me be like, oh, maybe I should do the YouTube channel too. That's all the cool people are doing it.
So a couple things. It's funny. Do you notice yourself, and without thinking, like prior to your Booktube channel, you saying certain things and understanding why there's like catchphrases? One of mine is like, there's a couple things. Like after I hear somebody spiel an inspiration, I often come back to the same sentence, and I don't mean to, but have you noticed anything like that? Yeah,
totally. I mean, I close out all my from the beginning. I closed out all my videos the same, and I didn't really realize I was doing it. And like I'd say the same kind of intro statement in little teeny variations, and eventually it's just I've done so many videos. Now I know the way I want to say it, and it kind of turned into that. I don't have as many like embedded randomly. Like if somebody had like a was playing what's that game, bingo, on like a map bingo scorecard. People would get a bingo very often because I don't think there's those things. Maybe there are.
No.
Certainly
so
at the beginning and end of my videos.
You're not a predictable person. I think that's maybe what at least that's where my head went when you're explaining this. You're not a predictable guy, and that's why I hold you as somebody that if I know you've read a book, for instance, you just did Sebastian de Castel's The Great Coats. And I felt, you ever feel bad for not liking a book? It was one of those books that totally. I didn't talk to. A lot of foundational people for me, a lot of good guys that I talk to and get good advice about. One being like Andy Palladino, wonderful author himself. He holds Sebastian very high as an author, and I love that. But I felt bad that I wasn't into it as much as I'm into like even his stuff. Not saying it's bad. It's just it's not for me. So throughout that novel particularly, I couldn't put my thoughts together as where I found what I felt to be familiar. And you put it on your thumbnail, and it was totally right. And that was the Three Musketeers. You nailed it. So that's just another example of what I'm saying when I can relate to what you're doing. For a guy that hasn't been doing as long as you find those connections that help me.
And I do feel bad about sometimes when I'm not liking a book, and I always come back to kind of what you said is, the art is totally subjective, and that's ultimately what this is. And there's no way we're all going to agree on something, and that'd be insane if we did. It's just 0% chance. All of us have some wild takes on books that nobody agrees with, or you feel like nobody agrees with. It's just the way art works sometimes.
100%, man. And I think that's one of the most attractive qualities. Looking through my comments real quick, because I don't want to miss any of these wonderful, wonderful people. I'm getting better at that. I know you do your lives and stuff. Like, have you noticed that the comments come in way faster than cognition is able to process?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. I love that. So John, he throws up one of my dear friends, Johnny Douglas, wonderful author of The Black Crown. I could chew bubblegum and give Matt shit for his book takes and all out bubblegum. So I'm guessing that you know the context for that, and maybe I'm just kind of slow.
I don't know me and John have disagreed on a handful of books, so
okay,
it's one of those.
There's the context. So I love that. And that's a wonderful thing when you can disagree with it. I think the world needs so much more of that. Like, I can disagree with somebody 1,000%, and we can be buddies. Like, if we don't get into politics or religion, which I'm very strongly on one side, you guys will never know it on my channel, I promise, because I won't go there. But as far as like being friends with people, I see all sorts of messages. In the broad term of messages, like people just hating on each other, and I'll never do that. You can believe what you want to believe, and like if we get along, we're gonna get along. So I appreciate that and the criticism in which you don't kind of take one side or the other. You give your thoughts. You don't put people down, because I've seen that as well on YouTube. So yeah, what are a couple of other hobbies that you have other than, reading? I know you're a family man. So what are some things that you get into other than reading?
I mean, the one that takes up the most amount of my time is youth sports coaching. It's by a huge margin. So I coach both my kids in both the sports that they do, and which right now is baseball and soccer. And I take that back. My wife just did my son's soccer team, and I did my daughter's soccer team at the same time. But that's right now. It's most of the days of the week that's what I'm doing for a couple hours every day, and I love it. I like spending time with my kids. It's great. I'm already going to be at the practice. I might as well hang out with my kids and their friends while I'm there.
Your philosophy, man, love it.
Yeah, and
is that rewarding for you?
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. It's really fun. Watching the growth in these kids and trying to get confidence, especially the ones that aren't very good or don't have, or you can tell, they got that yelling parent behind the scenes, and you can be that kind of stability for them for a couple hours. And that's really fun. And especially watching the kids because at this age, it means nothing if you're good or bad. You're going to progress at any kind of rate. And watching the kids watching these kids that aren't very good at a sport all of a sudden be the best kids on the team in a couple of years is really fun.
So yeah, man, I had no idea that was going to hit me during our interview about books, but man, that is 100% on the wavelength of how I feel about that situation, because I kind of came from the opposite spectrum. So it kind of hit home. I'll very briefly touch on it. I'm 6'5", and when I was going through high school, like 325 pounds, and lifted all the time, and I was put in a position like I didn't want to play college football. I did not want to. A lot of other things were probably the reason for that, like illness. But I was talked to, and like my schedule was planned without my knowing. So giving a voice to those kids who come and they're like, I have things to work on, and I know that my coach is going to give me that voice, and he's going to help me do what I need to do. Man, that's extra special. Those kids are lucky. So man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. I roped my dad always did that for me. He always coached my teams, and now he assistant coaches all my teams with me. And so it's fun being able to spend time with my dad and the next generation. And yeah, it's awesome.
That's incredible, man. Bravo and congrats, because not everybody gets a chance to do that. So that's incredible. I love to hear that kind of stuff. Your dad did that for you. You're doing that for your kids. And now you can do it together. That's incredible. So it's funny. I abbreviated this question when I wrote it, and now I'm like, what the hell did I mean? I know what I meant. So I love these new videos that you've been doing with your wife and her friend. And I just want to know why The Fourth Wing's your favorite all-time book.
Oh man, I was just talking about that today with all the soccer moms who do think it's their favorite book. Right. And yeah, dude, that book it's not the worst book I've read.
I've heard.
I will readily admit it's not the worst book I've ever read, but
I think I'm going to dive in. I think I'm going to at least have the experience to where I'm getting through it. And maybe it's a chance to get my wife into fantasy, which through your videos, I found we're kind of in the same situation. Like, it's very rare when I'm like, hey, babe, check this fantasy out. And she's like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Hardly ever happens. Excuse me. Hardly ever happens. It might. Although The Fourth Wing's quite epic. It seems like there's dragons. There's a school.
Yeah, it's definitely an epic kind of fantasy. It's just like, I don't know. For me, it's geared for people to hook them in if you haven't read a lot of fantasy before. And, you and I have read a lot of fantasy. So it wouldn't hit us the same way as somebody who's opening up the genre for the first time.
So I think, I would have never accepted that compliment you just gave me about reading some fantasy books I've got under my belt. But I've read Christopher Rocchio's prose, and he's made me sweat. And that's a cool experience to read a book where guys like you're reading it, and okay, so I'm not going to put words in your mouth, of course. Would you say Rockio, obviously a wonderful writer, would you say that is a harder read? That's not something you would suggest for somebody's first or second fantasy or sci-fi book?
I don't know. I think it could. I would say that. Yeah, I now that I think about it, you could definitely pick that up early on in your. It's not complicated. It's very well written.
Yeah,
and tons of people can come from other genres and eat that kind of prose up. But the story itself is not. It gets more complicated as it goes along, but not. Certainly, a vast majority of people have the intelligence level, like way more above half of the population would be able to read something like that and potentially enjoy it if they like that kind of thing.
I like that because that was kind of different than my opinion based on the small amount of books that I've read. That was my second sci-fi book, and it challenged me. I'm not going to lie. Like it did. It took me probably 2 months to get through, and I think it was because, man, he's very sure of himself in his prose, and it's like you said, it's not complicated. But if you aren't used to changing situations and keeping somewhat of a memory I don't write things down. I might start doing that, but I don't. And kind of keeping that in your mind without having to reiterate it on the page. Because lots of authors reiterate past events on the page as current events are happening. And he's really not that kind of guy. And that was new for me. So,
I mean, when it comes to authors that or books that I would not recommend to new people, it's not so much like how good the prose is or difficult the prose is. I look at it more on how complicated is the amount of characters and things that you have to pay attention to, because there's nothing that makes us smarter as fantasy readers than any other person. And the more fantasy you read, you don't become inherently smarter. You just learned how to read fantasy a little bit differently than a normal person would read a normal book. And one of those things about fantasy that you kind of have to realize when you're reading these denser reads is there may be a very large cast of characters that you have to pay attention to. And you have to devote this kind of brain power to saying, I really need to remember this thing. I know it's going to be important later on. And a reader that doesn't come from fantasy will blow past that kind of thing because why would they not? They've had no experience, realizing that that's the way you're supposed to read these things, or, slow down because you got to take this all in. And so, things like Malazan, I would never recommend to somebody for the first time.
You spoke the next words out of my mouth. Of course, I know you're a huge fan of that, and I can't wait to be. I think I will be, but I wasn't ready when I started. I started before Rockio, and I was like, I think this is amazing writing, but I don't know what the hell is going on. Let's give this a couple days. It's turned into a couple years. My wonderful other half, I'm way more down for a good murder mystery. She's reading I'm super into psychologically disturbing things.
Yeah.
Like not to a scary point where you have to worry about what I'm doing in my free time. But as far as movies and books go, I like a good psychological thriller. And she's reading a lot of those right now. A lot of female authors have become aware, or they've showed up on my TBR. And I don't know why I thought that would have been not something that happens, but man, there's Essa Hansen. She writes for Orbit. She's through Orbit, and she writes a sci-fi fantasy kind of soap opera fantasy series called the Graven trilogy, and it's incredible. So I think one of the coolest things is me for a reader, and I don't know if that was the same when you were a young reader, was finding male, female authors that just blow my mind, because I think there's a lot of preconceived notions when it comes to especially fantasy or sci-fi, and I'm so glad to be proven wrong, because I thought girls wrote girly things and got very traditional thinking, and that's not true. Their experience can totally lead an author in another way, and I've been blown away to say the least, and it's cool.
I mean, I've certainly read a lot more male authors than female authors. I also think that the kind of fantasy that I'm into, that more dark, epic fantasy, there's a lot more books for sale that are written by male authors than female authors. But some of my favorite books I've ever read in the fantasy genre are by women authors, and it's and I think it's becoming more prevalent. They're getting way more. There's a large amount of women authors in fantasy out there that are writing like these subgenres that I'm not super into, and that people like my wife are super into.
Yeah,
and they're making a ton of money, and a lot more money than the authors that I read a lot of. But yeah,
the Walmart books. That's what I call them. I walk through Walmart and there's like the same book except like different writers or authors. It's like I almost picked up Sarah J. Maas's, and I think I still will, kind of in the same thought frame as The Fourth Wing. I think there's parts of it I'll enjoy, and maybe almost in like the palate cleanser type of way. But wow, there's one that's really the Crescent Moon. I don't remember.
Crescent City.
Yes, dude, it's huge, and I'm like, so that's my favorite quality about a book. John Gwynne is probably the biggest reason I started reading fantasy and fell in love with it. And my ancestry, knowing that I'm Danish and Scandinavian. My last name's Sorensen. And I had so many people tell me, dude, you're straight from Scandinavia. And I'm just like, I don't know what you mean. And I looked into it. I'm like, oh, there's got to be some Vikings in there somewhere. So I'm attracted to the Norse mythology thing.
I read the first Crescent City book, and I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. It's certainly not as bad as some people say. It's got some attractive qualities to the book. I don't like romance stories, though. I don't like the traditional. I can love relationships in my books, like a really well written relationship, but I'm not a fan of the teenage love kind of story that has graphic sex scenes in it.
You said it.
It's just not my kind of thing.
I'm reading Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm not going to read the next couple books in the series for a little while. But one of the things that turned both me and my wife off of the TV series, was the rampant amounts of graphic sexual content. I just felt like if it's necessary, if there's violence that's necessary or what have you, sure, I'm game. But when it comes to like every other scene, kind of feeling awkward in the same room of, I just kind of, do you think they went overboard? Have you watched the series?
Yeah, I mean, I love the series. In general, I've never liked things that feel forced. So like I can be fine with, these sex things and shows and books if it feels like natural to the story. People like Joe Abercrombie writes some pretty graphic sex scenes and things like The First Law. It feels like it was important for the story, and it really helped it out. And it was awkward, and it wasn't like this beautiful sex. It was like very awkward and horrible, and
it was realistic.
And so I liked it. But yeah, I certainly love the Game of Thrones TV show. It always felt awkward, though, in part because I watched a lot of the episodes with my parents, and that was like, oh, come on.
Sorry, Dad. Or Mom. Sorry, Mom. No, I get what you're saying. And, I think there's going to be a point maybe when the kids aren't like walking in and out of the room, because there's a couple parts, even in the first few episodes, where I'm just like, there can't be a chance my 5-year-old walks in and it's like, hey, Dad, what's that? So, that's not the time, brother. So that's cool, man. We think similar in a lot of things. And I kind of felt maybe a little self-conscious about that myself. So hearing other people feel that similar way, where if somebody writes, or even if that's for a TV show or movie, for strictly like shock value, like that's not for me. And there's people who like that. But if there's a reason for it, I'm down 100%.
Yeah, I mean, people say like, I'll criticize sometimes a book for having like shock value level of like gore and blood in it. And then I'll have people saying like, oh, you must be really soft. You don't like that kind of thing. And it's like, no, I love that kind of thing.
Somebody said you're soft.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that will watch your videos. I mean, if you ever look at like your stats, like most of the people that watch at least my videos, aren't even subbed to me. They're just people that happen to come across a video. So they don't know anything about me. They're just hearing some guy saying there's blood in a review. But it's like, no, man, I love that kind of thing. Just make it feel natural and useful. And
I'm laughing because, man, I hope that I can kind of speak to you in a wavelength you understand, like, and I'm sure you will. That I'm taking a break move was freaking brilliant, dude. Just brilliant. I'm watching it. I was like, did he say 24 hours? You got to tell me about that. But I'm so glad he did, because that is brilliant.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with myself because I had this other April Fool's idea I was going to do that I thought was going to be awesome, and I'll do it probably next year. I didn't realize how much planning I had to do, but I was going to totally copy a lot of my favorite booktubers and like act like them on my channel and like dress up like them and do all their mannerisms and do a little quick book review from a bunch of different ones and make fun of them in fun ways.
So who's easy to do that for? Who would be like Philip Chase, maybe, because he always wears like those nice blazers that are kind of brown.
Yeah, I have a really fun script out. I have Philip Chase on there. People like Daniel Green are on there. There's like Petrix on there. I have a bunch of people on there.
For Daniel, you start from the other side of the room and like hit the chair and hey, I'm back. Something like.
Oh yeah, I get the graphics blowing up and.
Yes, and like talk to the off-camera girlfriend, like, "Hey, Kayla's doing this over." Yes, dude. I'm
these quick cuts and dude, I got it all. I had it all. I have it so planned out. I've done a lot of the work. I just need to like hit record. So next year, that's what I'm going for.
I'm not surprised. So I think.
But then I had this idea, so I was all disappointed, and then like the night before, I was like, "Oh, that'd be fun," and so I just saved it.
Love it. I watched it, and I'm like. I'm every person that watches that like watches you habitually, and they're like, oh no, man, I gotta support him, whatever it is. And it's like you say 24 hours, and I'm like, I looked at my wife and I said, what's going on right now? Because 24 hours, I'm cool with that. Like 10 years, I'm not. And it was I got to thinking, I was like, this was brilliant, man. I love that you did stuff. You've got a sense of humor. Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to. I won't say the person, but a lot of sometimes I do kind of little short comedic videos, and they're almost always like subtly making fun of another booktuber that made a serious version of that video. And so that I remember I watched a booktuber like quit Booktube, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm sure they have really good reasons for this, but it's kind of funny if I was to like act all dramatic and
sure.
So.
And I think people that are fans of you, it's very, it's like, okay, I got it. It's like almost I felt kind of lucky because most things may go over my head, and I said, I got it. And so it's wonderful, man. And you're not afraid to kind of like try different kind of videos, which is something I'm going to put forward this year. I wasn't able to do a lot of review videos like you. Just having our fourth child and like her still being really young, I'm just now getting to that point where I can start to read again, like in somewhat of a pace that makes sense. So huge influence.
Yeah, reviews can be kind of I've figured out kind of a niche in it, but in general, reviews can be rather disheartening for the creator a lot of, because you put this time into something and almost nobody's going to watch it. It'll be some of your least watched videos that you ever make. You know that off the bat.
Yes.
But and if you're, I know you like to read a lot of indie books. Now you made it even less likely somebody's going to watch it because less eyes on it. So it's hard to get the motivation sometimes to make the review videos for a lot of people.
Well, I think there's always going to be a spot, and you've really proved what you just said to me. Probably more than anybody that I watch. It's like those are important for me, like to move forward, especially on a one-to-one with the author, in the indie community. It's kind of an intimate thing. John Gwynn, he doesn't have any clue who I am. Huge inspiration to me. There's also huge inspirations like Ryan Cahill, and I'm able to actually like talk with him, even though he's incredibly successful in the indie space. So hearing that from you and kind of seeing like the list videos, those are really successful top 10s, top 100s I think you're one of the only people who could knock it out as well as you do, because 100 books, the stamina, the camera isn't always easy to look and go one or two takes, and you do it well.
Thanks.
Of course, man. So one of the things that you've done in the past, and I really think it's cool, man, is you do a little bit of research on people. Well, I'm here. I've done a little research. What is your 49ers tradition that may have people running away from you.
Yeah, so that's awesome. I have a tradition. My dad and I are very. I mean, I've watched every 49er game since I was a little kid. With my dad, unless we're like out of town or something.
Sure.
And I'm not a superstitious guy at all in life. I think astrology stuff is pretty dumb, and I think people can like focus on the wrong things in life, and these things don't matter. But I swear to God, there's certain things you can do when watching sports that are going to make your team just a little bit better.
Yes.
And you'll learn them over time if you watch enough. Certain ways you have to do things. And for me, the Niners play better if when they win. If I were to wash that jersey after a win, they would for sure lose the next game.
I agree.
It's just how it works. And so I just don't wash my jersey that I wear if they win, which is normally, pretty not a problem because it's like every other week you watch it. But they've been playing really well and going on these huge runs. I mean, like 10-game win streaks that have made it disgusting. But I gotta rock it. I mean, it's just I gotta do my little part. I'm not claiming that I'm gonna like change the outcome of a game, but like over the course of a year, I'm probably responsible for like 3 points on the board.
Yeah. You being a long-time 49ers fan, right? You've been a long-time 49ers. I'm a very long-time Michigan Wolverines fan. My parents are from Michigan.
Yeah, you must be happy.
Today, but man, from like 1990 or like from 2000 till like a couple days ago, it was terrible, dude. We were losing to Appalachian State in like fourth quarter by a a field goal. And I had a old school throwback, Charles Woodson, 97, or was it 93? Maybe 90, either 93 or 97, Rose Bowl throwback jersey that I would wear that I just had to stop wearing because I had a similar tradition.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't pulling through for me.
Yeah. No, yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do. I also am a big fan of, if somebody in my house is doing something irregular and they win, you can bet, that I'm going to be requiring you to do that irregular thing the next week.
Yeah. Like ranch dip or something.
Yeah, something.
100%. I agree with it. I love it. When I found that out, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give him a little bit of his game. So I was excited to tell you that.
That's awesome.
So this is a really hard question. It's one of the last ones that I usually ask authors, but in 3/4 through for you. What are you can give 1 to 3. I'll give you that you wish you could go back in time, novels, and just read it over for the first time because it gave you such a wonderful experience. I know it's a hard question.
No, it's a great question. It's a hard question for me also because as a fan of fantasy, I find often that my rereads are more enjoyable than my initial reads. And so there's a lot of books where I don't know that I'd relish going back and reading it because I'm glad that I got through that first read so I can go back and enjoy it in those future iterations. Yeah. I would say that in general, though, I would want to. I wish I could capture that energy that I got when I first read Game of Thrones. That was a big thing for me and got me back into fantasy after a long, break. And it's very, very rare for me to read a book that engages me at that level anymore. Like I'll like books more than that, but it's because that bar is so much higher now. But that feeling where you're like, man, it doesn't get better than this. It's something you increasingly get less times in your life when reading. I'd say that let's see. Probably the last Malazan book it just really rocked me. And I know that I won't get the same enjoyment out of it. I'll get different enjoyment out of it the second time. But the first time, everything just kind of came together and made me feel like such amazing happiness.
You're doing the read along right now in your Discord, right?
I am, yeah. We're reading the first book. We're going slowly.
Good.
And the final book I'd say is probably The Way of Kings. It was another one that was like my favorite book for a while, where it's like, man, it doesn't get better than this. And I've since read a lot of books I consider better, but for a long time, that was like that feeling, and how Sanderson, even though I find a lot of faults with some of his writing, he's still one of my favorite authors. He just has a way to pull on my emotional heartstrings in the happiness way.
Yeah.
A lot of books I read are like, I get sad for characters, but he's one of the guys that makes me have that full redemption arc for people all the time that makes you just feel happy.
There's two series that I was really excited to tell you I'm about to dive in. The first one was remind me of the series name, because me, it's just Way of Kings, and then you've got
Stormlight Archive.
Yeah, Stormlight Archive. Sorry, I'm very excited to dive into that. I've only read Elantris from Brandon Sanderson, and I don't think that that's given me enough of what he is, his essence.
No, I didn't like Elantris.
I didn't either.
Frankly.
By the way, man, I almost died when I seen you crumble up a dust cover. And say I died a little bit inside. I was like, I respect it, but me, like, I almost died. Why? Is there a reason that you just? I knew that you were that way before I actually seen with that way. I knew that you preferred books without dust covers. Looking at your bookshelf behind you, you can tell. But it just was like the confirmation of it. I died a little bit.
Yeah, it's a few reasons actually. One of them is because when I started reading, I mean, a lot of us did, so it's not like some unique thing, but I started reading, big books at a young age, and I had no reason to think that the cover was important. Because books had no value to me. My parents bought me books. I got books from the library. They had literally no value in my little brain. And so throwing away this thing that was annoying me, that would get in my way when I'm trying to read a book and slip off, it became, for me, it was like, I just need to throw this away. It's dumb. I hate it. And then the other part is like, I really love the look and feel of really, really old libraries. That pre-book cover libraries. I love that look. And dust covers ruin that aesthetic for me. And because I don't care about the value of, like, the monetary value of my books, because I'm never going to sell them. They're mine.
Yes.
All I care about is how they feel and look to me. I like the look better, and I'm going to do it.
Dude, I'm not going to throw my dust cover away, but like literally everything else that you said, like, there are autographs that from indie authors that mean so much to me, and they have no idea. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh, he's a reviewer who asked for a book. I don't know. I'll try to display that when I review the book, because there's a list, because, like I said, last year I wasn't able to. But there's a good section of my custom-built shelves that I put those books. And I think when they realize how wonderful those are to me, just like, saying those, that kind of sentimental feeling for you, it's like the monetary value is irrelevant. Like, don't bother even telling me, because I know what it means to me, and that's superior. Respect it, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have intentions to sell their books, which makes sense. And there's this other group of people that will never sell it, but think maybe they would someday. That kind of hoarding mentality.
Yeah.
I know dang well that I'm never actually going to get around to selling them.
Dude, I promise you I understand. I'm so relieved to kind of hear that from people that I look up to. And it's like, I also respect people who are like, I'm going to collect this, and maybe one day when I'm, in a spot, I might sell it. That's just not an option for me. And even if it was an option for me, the ones that I hold dearest, it's like I'm probably not going to get a lot of money for anyway. So it's like, not that I even thought that far, but now that I am, I just have those personal loves. And one of those is having good relationships with authors. And I mean, they've sent you their baby, dude. Like, right. And that just as more than I do, just as well or more. So love to hear that. So your experience beginning on YouTube was mostly traditional published authors?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know when the first time I read a self-published author were, but it was definitely after I read a lot of books. They just never would come on my radar, because like the way I find the fantasy books that I was reading would have never come across a self-published author, because I was like, I should get back into fantasy. What should I do? well, I'm not a guy that just likes to just take a personal recommendation. I want like stats. And
You
I'm
are
like,
that guy.
I went to like Reddit, and they do this thing on Reddit every now and then on the fantasy subreddit where they're like, let's vote on the top fantasy books. And I was like, let me just start at the top, just work my way down.
Makes sense.
And there's every now and there's some things that show up on those top lists like that are probably self-published, but not the things that are sitting around the top. Those are all published books.
So I asked that question to kind of ask the real question. What is your experience if you were to give a blanket statement to somebody who's like, I've only read traditionally published authors. How would you curate your opinion right now on the indie fantasy authors?
I'd probably give what I consider a more real answer for me. Sure. I watch a lot of videos with people that if they were asked this question would say like, self-published is every bit as good as published authors. I don't personally believe that. My belief is that the best self-published authors are just as good, if not better, than the best published authors. But the average quality of the average book, you're probably going to find more hits, at least for me, on the published side than the self-published side. I'm sure there's a lot of really bad published books, but there is just so much low effort junk on the self-published side. So what I would tell somebody is, don't sleep on self-published books. The ones that are highly looked after, that you're probably looking at a lot of gold mines there.
Sure.
But there's a lot of people also that want to find that gold, and they're willing to kind of sort through it. I'm not one of those people. But there's a lot of people out there that are.
I got you.
Like that.
I'm gonna send them to you because I 100%. I feel that answer, dude. I think that's honest, and I think you really kind of considered your answer when asked that. And I've never asked that to anybody before, and I would agree with you, man. I've heard people, there's no quality in self-published authors or their books. Completely wrong. But you take traditionally published editors that are paid. You've got many different kinds of editors. It just makes sense that there's going to be more hits for a traditionally published author than a indie author. It makes sense. That's just the way it is. But in the same vein, I want to say some of my favorite books, in fact, most of my favorite are indie authors, just because I was that guy that you were speaking of. That takes chances on books. I don't always review every book that I read. I try to. Yeah. But when I find and I'm going to throw his name out there because I think that you would really, really enjoy his books. I hope you don't sleep on this recommendation. I know you get a lot of them. John Palladino's Tragedy of Sedaine series. He's got 2 books out, working on 3, almost done. It's going to be finished soon.
I actually read his first book.
I know.
And I really liked it. I haven't got around to reading the second one yet, but I will eventually. But yeah, I really liked it.
I'm halfway through it, and I'm equally, if not more, impressed through this one. It's different because there's different settings and there's different situations. But when it comes to grimdark, epic grimdark fantasy indie authors coming at you, it's like I've just had so much fun.
I find, and this is a totally uneducated answer, but it's easy when you're an indie author to say like, oh, I don't have a big budget. I can do all this on the smallest little shoestring and get a book out there.
Yes.
But don't realize that, you can't write a book by yourself. You're going to have somebody there to, if not be a traditional editor, to be arc readers, people that you lean on to bounce ideas off of and clean up all the things that you miss, because there's very real human conditions that we can't see the errors in the way that we write. And you have to have people on the back end. And it's easy for some people, I think, to say like, I can do all that on my own. And that would only happen on the self-published route, Yeah. But those indie authors that are great find out ways to get either spend money on the front end to make sure that's done, or really utilize a network of people around them to help, workshop ideas.
this may seem like I'm a little bit on sides just because it's, obviously my interview, but I've searched for the conversation you and I have just had in the last 5 minutes. So I'm really thankful for it, man, because I think a lot of people are looking for that answer. I think people want to know what experienced fantasy book readers feel about the indie space, because it's inevitable that it's going to be relevant. It's already relevant, and just going to be more so. And there's going to be those who are obviously more successful, and those are going to be sought after. And the way that they did that, and I think it's going to fall back to similar traits of a traditionally published author who has that advantage, who has that opportunity, such as good editors. Are you willing to look? When I look at a book, I'm buying it whether I like the cover or not. I hate to say it. It may not even have nothing to do with what's inside that book. That's what I'm spending my money on. We just buy covers based on what they look like sometimes. And those special ones that we hear about through the grapevine, well, we either discover they're gold or they're not. And so thank you for that answer, man.
Yeah, one thing also about indie books I've found is that, sometimes you can find that you like a really specific subgenre. And as you dive into that, you open up a great many books that you're going to like now when you open up to a more indie scene. Like for me, I randomly read the Cradle series by Will White. Will White is one of the top indie authors for the fantasy scene in terms of success.
Yeah.
And when I read his, I was like, oh, turns out I really like this whole progression fantasy thing. I should go read more to that. And as I look into it, I'm like, oh, wow, the only books in that genre are self-published books. Apparently, I'm going to go read a bunch of self-published books now.
Okay.
So you can dive down in these things and find a treasure trove in the indie scene when you find out specific tastes.
I think that's super important. I didn't realize it until you kind of just were talking about it. How those, especially guys like you who have been reading for a while, found a reason to read an indie book. So going through that for you, I think is important as well. It's also a part of that answer. For me, it was like I started this Booktube channel. I thought I'd do just like random reviews, this and that. Obviously passionate about it because of the way I fell into it was, I didn't read as a kid. It was something I found at 29. And so for different reasons, I found it passionate. And again, I think those specific answers that you just kind of covered wonderfully, people are after. So I appreciate you kind of throwing that in there, man.
Yeah.
Tori, thank you for being here. I'm sure I didn't see any messages prior to this, but I'm terrible at that. So thank you for being here. Kindle's Kicks, man. Bibliotheory. Josh. Okay. So he says, hey, Matts, have you read any Stavely? I haven't, so I'm gonna let you answer this. Unhewn Throne is super dope. Have you read any Stavely?
No, it's the next book I'm going to be listening to after I finish up this Priest of Bones book by somebody. I don't know who it's by.
I just got it too.
So yeah, but yeah, I'll be reading Unhewn Throne later this month.
I'm excited to get to Priest of Bones, man. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie, it's simply because Mike was reading it. That I bought it, and it's not like thick as this. It's like one of the shorter fantasy books I have, so it's not going to be a big deal. And also Sword of Kaigen's one I'm going to get into soon, but more so, I know that you're a huge fan of the Dandelion Dynasty. Very quick to come up on my listen, and like kind of that immersion read where you're listening and reading at the same time. I think I'm most excited for the Dandelion Dynasty because of how you spoke about it. Very excited.
Yeah, Dandelion Dynasty is one of those few books that I've read where all the books slap and they hit you in these ways that, like, I don't know. I'm not a big, like, in my own life, like a big philosophical guy, but when you get these authors that can expertly weave in these deep human themes into them,
undeniably
in a poetic way, like somebody like a Ken Liu can, somebody like a Steven Erikson can. It takes what is normally a really good book and makes it, in my opinion, to die for. And that's what Ken Liu did on all 4 of those books for me.
I'm excited. I recently, and I don't usually talk about people I'm going to interview in the future, but one that I know for sure I will eventually when his next book comes out. That's when he wants to do it. Is Ken Liu, and when I finish the Dandelion Dynasty, I just know based on some things you've said, I've started it already. I haven't gotten deep. But I'm already seeing evidence of what I've heard about that book being relevant and evident in even the beginnings. And he's the 3-Body Problem is one of those very divisive books. Maybe not in the content. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. I've only started it, but at least in the opinion of it, it's divisive. Some people love it. Some people are like, "Oh, I hate it." I don't know where I fall in that spectrum yet. So. But anyway, he translated that book. So just knowing how intelligent he is and going into that, knowing what he's done and what he's capable of is just kind of incredible, man. You don't really get to know these personal details that I've had the opportunity, that you've had the opportunity to know about people. Because a book I've found to be a very intimate piece, man. As most fantastic as it could be, it's usually extremely telling author to author about them as an individual, more so than I think that authors realize.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm going to go through a bunch of different either ors.
Okay.
It's like the 9/10 through this interview, so we ain't got a super long way to go. So I'm going to go kind of quick, and I'm excited to hear your answers. All right. Favorite fantasy race, real quick. Just that's the kind of blatant one.
Dwarves.
Mead or brandy?
Oh, you.
Huh? What is it?
Say the question again.
Oh, sorry. Mead, like honey mead, or brandy?
Oh, brandy for sure.
Mace or a halberd?
Mace.
All right, you're in there for the gist. You're brutal. All right, high or low magic system?
High.
Epic or a grimdark, kind of darker feel?
Grimdark.
All right. Average size novel, soft size novel, or a tome?
Tome. Yeah, the bigger the better.
My guy. Chicken or beef?
I eat a lot more chicken because I try to be healthy, but beef gets a higher score.
I got you. No, I relate. Noodles or rice?
Man, that's the first one I've been like, I have to have both, but I'll go rice.
All right, respect. Xbox or PlayStation?
PlayStation.
Mac. All right, Mac or PC?
PC.
Dude. Matt's fantasy book reviews or Beer of Darkness?
Beer of Darkness all the way.
Oh, dude. You know what? I love your answers. I love it. Oh, my guy. It's funny, man. You know, those really fun. I've never done that before either. And I was like, that would be super fun. It's telling. And like almost every single one of them I agree. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Man, there's some wonderful people over here in the chat. And I have to get me I have a moderator. Tonight he's doing something very important. But I'm gonna have to talk to him because I'm not so good at like deciphering these wonderful comments that are context based on what we're talking about, based on context throughout that chat. So I want to just say as a blanket statement, I see you guys. You guys are wonderful. Kindles and Kicks, man. He's been one of my most recent favorite book channels or Booktube channels to come into play. Josh Eat Books, man, he's got wonderful stuff coming out too, as well as his recommendations in my chat. So thank you guys. Everyone in the world. Yes, I know he's a huge fan of Ken Liu. Josh said the same thing. Ken Liu is phenomenal, educational, and humbling, on par with Erickson. Yes. Is it Backer or Baker?
I think it's Baker.
I think so too. I've read the first book, and it's whoa, dude, whoa. That was my first fantasy book. Before my first fantasy book, I didn't retain much, but I do know that I'm going to the next time I read it.
Baker's in that category for me. I've only read the first book, but oh my god, I can't stop thinking about it. And I'm going to read the second book here like the
So
beginning of next month. I can't wait.
the remind me of her name if you remember the hooker.
Oh yeah, I'm so bad at names. It's been
So
6 months
you know
since
who
I
I'm
read it.
talking about though.
Yeah.
So she plays, I think, one of the most pivotal roles in a fantasy book. Knowing what I know now is reading some, and some people are like, "Oh, you're a bigot for that," and Baker gets quite hammered for being a bigot. If you look up some other YouTube videos, and I don't think he is, and I don't think I am. I have a lot of respect for men and women, and I think what's important of that character was how real her situation was and how she didn't want to do what she was doing. She had relationships with a very main character, and how it just kind of evolved, man. And I think the reason I'm saying this is for anybody who maybe have caught wind of that side of his books, give it a chance, because I think that you'll think, hopefully in the same vein as I do, because it's not as literal, I think, as you may think it's going to be. Anyway, wonderful people.
I mean, I feel like about 99% of the time, people claim an author is a bigot or racist or sexist or any comment because of the way they write a book. I personally find to be like totally false. What they mean is that there was bigotry in that book, and which is, yes, it's supposed to be in the book. You know, right. Yes, you got it. That's the point. And I don't subscribe to that, but I can write about it. You know, it always blows my mind when people connect these things to people. You know, I've mentioned many times that certain things are racist in books I read, and I don't particularly enjoy it because there's a lot of these racist things going on that, you know, but that means nothing about the author or the people that like it.
Because it's a reality is not my fault as an author. You know what I mean? If I'm making a point through real life things, that's not to blame on my behalf. Like, if I use what's realistic and what life kind of has shown me, and if you consider that to be bigotry or misogyny or racist or sexist, whatever it is, I'm probably in agreement with you. But that doesn't fall amongst the things that you can call me as a person. Man, love that you said that.
I'm sure there are a lot of racist and bigoted writers, and I'm sure
dude.
I'm sure they exist, and I'm sure that like there's many people. If you're like look at their body of work, and you're like, man, there is one theme you're going for here.
There's an overwhelming theme going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot of exceptions to what I just said, but a lot of the time it's not.
It's clear 1,000,000% what you meant, and I'm agreeing with it. So is essentially, guys, if I'm saying the same thing as what Matthew just said, it's like, Mom, sorry, I just called you Matthew. My mom is the only person that calls me Matthew. Sorry. And it's just a part of what is. So telling a story through what is in a matrix that could be is only keeping it kind of honest. That doesn't say anything about people in their soul. So I just kind of beg people to keep that open mind and acknowledge that there are exceptions, though. Definitely.
Sure.
So thank you for I've tried a couple new things talking with you, man. I know that I could, and it's been so much fun. So I just wanted to say, dwindling down to the end of this, I know you're a busy guy. You've got a family, so I appreciate you spending a little time on the channel. And man, it's been so much fun, dude.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's been a blast. I've loved what you're doing for the for this corner of the YouTube. You know, I feel like you're doing that thing that I feel like people should do more of on Booktube, and it doesn't bring like immediate like success to the channel, but what it does is it's like I'm gonna do something that other people aren't doing. I'm gonna bring up something different to YouTube that I wish more people did. You know, it's easy to be like, all right, I'm the 50th guy doing this, but to be like, I'm going to go hard on the indie book interviews or book interviews in general, but, hyper focus on this and make it my jam and do a lot of it. And it's cool, to watch. And I appreciate it.
Man, honestly, out of the people who have inspired me to even be here, you have by far shown evidence of being here to watch that and kind of witness, what I had no idea was not planned. It's kind of just where I'm falling. It's not about success. It's just kind of about like this human condition we all have and connecting with people. And this is where I found myself. So seeing you in the chats or talking about or sharing an interview, man, I just want you to know personally between man and man, that's been incredible to see based on how much you've influenced what I'm doing here. So, man, keep doing a wonderful, incredible, fast-paced thing that you're doing, and I'll be here for it. And so many other what is it 21,000 other people will. Incredible number, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's nice
Of course. So, Matt, huge thanks. Y'all that were here for the live conversation, thank you so much. It makes it so much fun to see you guys talking over there and to throw up some comments that you've got, some opinions, this or that. So it means a whole lot. And to those who will watch in the future on the replay, thank you just as much. And I think Josh Eats Books closes that thought out the best. Thanks, Matt. There's lots of us guys, so we're only two. Thank you, Tim. Epic chat. Matt, we'll catch you soon. We'll talk soon. And
Absolutely.
Everybody else, let's see. I'm kind of known for not knowing the hell my next interview is. I'll post it on Twitter and all my socials because right now it evades me. So have a wonderful night, y'all.
Thanks.